Good Sunday morning and welcome to Talk of the Town every Sunday morning on 92.3 WIL, 101 ESPN, and 106.5 The Arch. I am your host today, Shawn Anthony. Talk of the Town is a public service program and it is produced by Hubbard Radio, St. Louis. Our mission is to provide you with new information on great organizations and great people here in the St. Louis area that work hard to make things easier for others and to make St. Louis just a better place to live. Our intent here on the program is to be timely and topical and to entertain and inform. So for the next half hour, we'll be talking about a really unique and fascinating story about the Campbell House Museum in downtown St. Louis. And to tell us more about it is the executive director of the museum, and that is Andy Hahn. Good morning, Andy. Thank you for joining me today.
Good morning. It's my great pleasure to be here with you.
The Campbell House Museum, it dates back to 1851, if I'm not mistaken. And
that's correct.
There is a lot that goes into just the backstory of this home. So I want to just kind of let you paint us the picture of how this came to be and the significance of this building.
Sure. I'd like to start by just sharing with the listeners an excerpt from a 1934 article in the New York Times. And I'm just going to read the first couple paragraphs to this article because I think it sets the stage for what we're going to talk about today very well. The headline, these old newspapers oftentimes have multiple headlines, and this particular one has 4 headlines. The big headline at the top reads, "Demented Man, Target of Lawyers. Incompetent son of Western pioneer holds vast wealth which is center of lawsuit. Yale University is to benefit. Estate of Hazlitt Campbell, eccentric St. Louis character, has been willed to university." And the article begins. Dickens has nothing to do with it, but this is the tale of 2 cities. In the heart of the modern business district of St. Louis is a square of ground with an old house on it. Thousands who have been passing the house for years have called it the Mystery House. They see no life about this ancient dwelling, except once a day, always at the same hour, when a physician stops his car in front of the gate, goes up the stone steps, and rings the bell. Real estate men wanting that square of the southwest corner of 15th and Locust Streets for business have offered fortunes for it. But in it live 2 sons of the old frontiersman Robert Campbell, who built it. They were Hugh Campbell, an eccentric millionaire, and his demented brother Hazlitt Campbell, also a millionaire. Both were bachelors, so there were no women to advise that the old house be sold or torn down, and Hugh refused all offers for the property. To all the real estate men, he gave the same answer. "It was my father's wish that I should always care for my brother Hazlitt, and he loves this house just as it is, and so it shall remain as long as he lives."
Wow.
And he would go on to live actually in that house for another 5 years before he would die. And the house pretty much remained unchanged for 60 years. The Campbells had moved into the house in 1854. And all the article I just read said Robert Campbell built it. In fact, he was the 3rd owner of the building. Moving in 1854, the house was 3 years old when the Campbells bought the building and moved in. But what's remarkable, one of the very many remarkable things about the house is that the Campbells lived in it continuously 2 generations for almost the next 90 years until the late 1930s, until Hazlitt Campbell did finally die in 1938.
Wow. So that's an unbelievable history right there. And this was a very, very upscale neighborhood. This was the place to be when Robert purchased this home.
That's correct. In 1854, when he moved in, this house was right in the middle of a very new and very upscale because it was very expensive, residential neighborhood called Lucas Place. It was really the first private street in St. Louis, and that's something that St. Louis is kind of well known for in kind of development and urban history circles, these private streets and private places. Lucas Place was the first of these. It was really also the first suburban neighborhood in St. Louis. When the neighborhood was laid out in 1850, the developer picked a very nice open piece of land. It was essentially farm ground. And as he began to sell those lots, St. Louisans thought he was crazy Because why would anyone want to live a mile from the river? It was so far from shopping and from the churches and from most of the businesses. Nobody would want to live that far out. Obviously, history proved those people very wrong.
Yes. That is just unbelievable to think about. We're talking 15th and Locust,
Right.
correct?
It's just shy of 1 mile from the river.
Unbelievable. And that was almost farmland out there.
It was farmland at 15th Street.
Yeah.
I mean, west of 15th Street. I mean, there was some development, but what we think of as city development with blocks and houses built on every block, that was east of there. But you have to remember, in 1850, St. Louis only had a population of about 100,000 people, so nothing near what the region is today.
Mm-hmm. How did they come into this wealth? What was the importance behind Robert Campbell?
Well, when Robert bought the Campbell house in 1854, he was a middle-aged, very established civic father and businessman here in St. Louis. He was 50 years old. He had been born in 1804 in a place called Plumbridge in County Tyrone, which is today part of Northern Ireland. And he was the youngest son, his father's youngest son, which meant, according to the tradition and the laws of the United Kingdom, he didn't really stand to inherit much property. He had 11 older brothers and sisters, so he was at the bottom of the line, so to speak. So he and another brother decided to make their way to America. It's kind of the quintessential immigrant story, and see what happened. Now, I should say that they came under much better circumstances than most immigrants. They came with money in their pockets. They came with first-class tickets. And probably most importantly, they came with many contacts here, especially in places like Philadelphia and in Richmond, Virginia. And that's actually where Robert settled for the first year of his life. But upon arriving here, his health took a turn for the worst. He suffered from some sort of respiratory illness. It caused him to cough up blood. It made him difficult for him to breathe. And he came out here to St. Louis at the recommendation of his brother to take part in a business transaction, and he saw a doctor here, an old doctor named Dr. Farah. And Dr. Farah's prescription, so to speak, for Robert's respiratory problems was to go to the mountains. Dr. Farah said, I sent a number of young men with conditions similar to yours out to the Rocky Mountains, where, of course, the air is thinner and cleaner, and he said they've come back completely cured. So Robert thought, well, I'll give it a try, and it didn't hurt that there was really good business opportunities out there. So he signed up as a clerk for an outfit called the American Fur Company. This was almost 200 years ago in 1823. Worked here out of St. Louis for about a year. But after about a year or 18 months, he was the company clerk for a fur trading caravan that was going out to the Rocky Mountains. Robert was one of a group of 70 men and about 150 horses that set out from St. Louis on the 1st of November in 1825. And those men and that group of horses walked for the next 8 months and 11 days till the middle of June 1826, when they reached the rendezvous site. And the rendezvous was kind of the annual fur trading convention where the traders would come from St. Louis with all the goods to trade. And then the white trappers and the Native Americans would come from all over the West and trade their furs like beaver and wolf and bear and even buffalo for those goods those men brought from St. Louis. So that's how Robert got his start in business, and really was one of the key people that helped open up the American West to later settlement. He helped blaze the Oregon Trail. He and his partner, another St. Louisan named William Sublette, built the halfway point on the Oregon Trail, a place called Fort Laramie. And eventually, after the fur trade kind of subsided, he invested his money back here in St. Louis in real estate and the railroads. And he gave Mark Twain actually his first job as a riverboat pilot on the Mississippi River in 1858. He would go on to help found Kansas City, Missouri, and El Paso, Texas. He owned a bank. And at the end of his career, he owned the largest and fanciest hotel in town. And this is the era right at the end of the Civil War, beginning in about 1865, and it was called the Southern Hotel. And that became kind of his primary investment and created such a large fortune that he, or his children, I should say, never had to work a day in their life. And in fact, none of them ever did. So they lived what we usually call the life of gentlemen.
along the way, this house, now the Campbell House Museum, I imagine has played host to probably some pretty interesting people, too.
For sure. This house was really one of the centers of St. Louis society in the 19th century, from the 1860s really through the 1880s and 90s. Part of that was based on Robert's standing in the community as a businessman and a civic leader. Part of that reputation was based on his wife's status as one of the social hostesses in town, and so Campbell's hosted many important and interesting people. First and foremost is President and Mrs. Ulysses Grant, and we are really kind of one of the only site here in downtown St. Louis that still has strong Grant associations, a domestic site. The Grants were guests at many receptions at the Campbell House, many dinners, and when visitors come down to tour the Campbell House, they can see the rooms that the Grants were entertained in, the table where they had dinner, and we can even tell you about some of the things that they talked about and the music they danced to and those very sorts of interesting things.
That is amazing. And that's one of the things that's so unique, I think, about this museum is that not only is the house basically left intact, but a lot of the furniture, the paintings, the clothes.
Exactly. It's very rare, especially for a building from this vintage, the middle of the 19th century, 1860s, 70s, and 80s, to have much of original collection. But given the way that Hazlett Campbell's estate was set up when he died in 1938, everything that was in the house was sold at a public auction, and a group of St. Louisans had the idea to preserve the house and open it to the public as a museum. So they fought very hard and worked very hard over a number of years, and they were able to acquire the bulk of what was in the house. So when visitors come down, they can see the original furnishings, the tables, the chairs, even the light fixtures, the artwork, the mirror, their clothing, as you mentioned, their carriages, and probably most importantly is a really unbelievable collection of documents. And while visitors don't see those when they come on tour, they hear about them because the stories that we tell, the history that we share with visitors is all based on those documents. It's one thing to go and see a site that might be old or somewhat architecturally interesting, and Campbell House is certainly both of those things, but to see a place that accurately reflects the way a family lived in it in terms of how it was furnished, how it was decorated, but like I said, most importantly, that we can share some of those very unique stories about how one family lived in this building for almost 100 years is very special.
Yes, and to have all the documentation that goes along with it, so it's not just a guessing game.
Exactly.
You have everything here. That's what's so cool about this. If you're just joining us, we're talking with Andy Hahn. He is the executive director of the Campbell House Museum, downtown St. Louis, 15th at Locust. But recently, you completed a multi-million-dollar restoration project.
Correct.
That kind of helped bring it back to even more of its original splendor, I guess, to say. Tell me a little bit about that and what you undertook during that renovation.
Well, I was just mentioning, we were just talking a little bit about those documents, and kind of the crown jewel of those original family documents is actually an album of 60 photographs that the Campbells had taken of every room in their house in about 1880. And so those photographs, which are very unusual to have this sorts of pictorial documentation from this period, the Campbells went to great expense and effort to have someone photograph their house. We don't think of anything today about pulling out our phone or our digital camera and taking snapshots, but these photographs were taken on cameras that didn't even have film. The images had to be taken on large pieces of glass. And like I said, these are kind of our crown jewel and have been the basis for this restoration project. While the furniture is all original, of course, and the photos are a guide in placing the furniture in their original locations, the photographs are also a guide in terms of the decor of the rooms. What did the carpet look like? How was the woodwork finished? How was the walls and some cases the ceilings painted? And so beginning in the year 2000, we began planning and raising funds for a project to restore the house. Very quickly, we